Hello, Ronnie.
Hello, and I've forgotten your name straight away.
That's okay. Well, it'll be nice and easy to remember.
Martin?
It's Martin. You're on
Thank
the
you.
Martin Talk Show.
Thank you very much.
We're here at the Little Angel
Angel.
Theatre.
Yeah, so much. Should we start that again?
No, that was. Do you know what? That was a perfect beginning. I loved
Thank
it,
you
Ronnie.
so much. Good.
So here we are, Ronnie. Thank you so much for joining me today. And before we get into it, I also want to say thank you to the theatre for allowing us to use this space.
Isn't it wonderful? And it's a home from home for me because I started my career here way back in the early 60s. So
so it can be a more. I feel like this can be a more perfect setting to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely right.
So let's get straight into it then. Tell me a little bit about what this theatre, what this space means to you.
Well, basically, it was the place where I visited when I was, I think, 14 years old first. And I'd heard about it because I was a member of the British Puppet and Model Theatre Guild, which I now am president of. I mean,
wow.
I know it's a long story, but I won't go into all that now. But anyway, they said, there's this this puppet theatre that's, fairly new. It opened, I think, in November 1961. This was about 1963 that I heard about it. Anyway, so I went along and I saw a production of The Little Mermaid on this very stage here, marionette string puppets. And I was just over. Well, I don't know what the word is. It just totally, consumed the whole of everything I thought about theatre and puppets and everything. Beautiful lighting, beautiful puppetry, beautifully made puppets, all hand carved by John Wright and his team of puppeteers. And the show was the Hans Andersen story. Very sad, but oh my goodness, beautiful music, everything. And I just thought, this is the place for me. And I wonder whether they ever have apprenticeships. Anyway, I didn't sort of think about it. I'm still at school, of course, so I didn't think too much about, whether I could get a permanent job there or whatever. But anyway, I sort of, let me try and think. I came a few weekends because I could only have weekends free, obviously school days during the week. But I did things like showing people to their seats. I swept the auditorium floor. So I got to know the company a little bit. John Wright was this amazing personality, in charge of the building. He'd set the whole thing up. It was his, whole sort of conception to have a puppet theatre in London. So eventually when it was a summer term and it was, I'm trying to think, I was just 15 and I was allowed to leave school at 15 then because this was 1896. No, I'm joking. So it was a long time ago. And there I sort of thought, well, I'll write to John Wright because, I thought you have to do those sort of things in those days. So I wrote this not terrible letter. I wrote a letter saying, do you ever have apprenticeships? I'd be really keen. I've met you, but we haven't really talked about jobs or anything like that. Anyway, he sent me a letter back and I still have it in my scrapbook somewhere saying, yes, I remember your visit to the Little Angel Theatre and do come along and have a chat. Let's talk about it all. Well, I just thought, wow, how fantastic. I didn't realise it was going to be, it seemed to be quite so easy as that. Anyway, I went along and I met with John properly and I was terribly nervous. But he was just lovely and the company were adorable. Lindy Wright is still around, his wife, and she was there and she was lovely. Christopher Leith, all these wonderful puppeteers that, have become iconic as well in the world of puppetry. Anyway, he accepted me. He said, yes, we can take you on, but, and I went, what's the but? And he said, we can't afford to pay you. So I thought, but the thing is, we'll teach you everything you want to know about puppetry. We're a theatre. We've got, a bridge where we can do the string marionettes. We've got a pit where we can do the glove puppets and the rod puppets. I mean, it was amazing. So I thought, that's all right, I said, thinking. Anyway, I went back home and my parents said, my father was a teacher, can you believe? Anyway, he said, so tell me, after I was, I'd calmed down a bit, but so excited about being here at the theatre. Anyway, he said, so how much are they going to pay you? How much will they? And they won't be paying me. No, it's for services rented to the theatre. It'll be. And my father went, and he signalled to my my mum, and they went off into the kitchen. Now, I thought they were there for about half an hour discussing my future. Anyway, probably 2 minutes later, they came back. My mother had a twinkle in her eye, and they both said, well, look, we've decided we'll give you 6 months to be at the theatre, 3 months for you to see whether you like it or whether you get on with everybody. But more importantly, 3 months to see whether they can cope with you. So anyway, that happened, and I was there. In fact, I was there originally for about 8 months at the theatre. And it was amazing. Sadly, my father passed away during that time. So they'd actually very sweetly gave me £2 a week. Now, this was way back in the early 60s. I think £2 was worth a little bit more money than it is now. But I did do naughty things like London Transport. I cheated on the tubes because I lived in South London and I had to come to the Angel tube station. And you say, one from Old Street, please. And that was like one stop away from the theatre. So I didn't have to pay too much. And then I had the cheapest lunches, 2 and 4 pence, I remember, at the Cross Street Cafe, which is no longer there now. It's all rather smart shops there now. But anyway, which is just down the road from the theatre, by the way. Anyway, and I think it was, I remember one of the meals I used to have was, what was it? Shepherd's pie, chips and piss. Now, piss being peas, because they were lovely Turkish or Greek, and they didn't quite say peas properly, but I always remember that as a kid. Oh, anyway, there you go. That's the early days of the theatre, and of course, I still sweat the auditorium. I still did scene changes, in the middle of the shows, and I looked at all the puppeteers up on the bridge and how they worked this marionettes, and during lunch hours and during free time, I was up there trying to learn to work puppets, and that's how I started in this wonderful profession of puppetry.
What I find really interesting about the beginning part of your journey within the arts is that moment that a lot of us face, is that moment of there's not a career for you here. There's not a definite direction forward. You're not going to get paid at the beginning of this. But you've shown a great example of a career and opportunities that can come from that moment. Now, there are a lot of young people out there that will probably listen to this and have their parents say to them, or other peers say to them, don't go into the arts. But tell me a little bit about the impact this theatre and the arts have had on you, and if you hadn't have taken that moment of taking a chance on yourself.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think I was always keen on puppetry right from a child. I'd loved all the stuff on the telly, all the Stingrays and the Thunderbirds, all the Jerry Anderson stuff. And I even liked the Watch with Mother puppets. I mean, I go back, my childhood is sort of 50s and 50s really. So all the stuff that was around at that time in the early 60s, I was watching like mad. And it just inspired me. I think, too, I've always loved theatre. I used to watch the Sunday matinees on ITV. I think it was ITV, with my mum, and they were the sort of films like the Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire's, all those early 40s and 50s type musicals. And I loved musicals. I loved all dancing and theatres, although we didn't have the money in our family to go to drama school or any of those things. So it wasn't possible for me to do that. But I just fell in love with theatre per se. And then the fact that when I was at school, I had one friend. My senior school was pretty boring. I hated it. It was very much sports orientated. And looking at me now, you can say I'm a bit of a weakling. I hated football. I thought, why are they kicking a ball around? I mean, it seems boring to me. And then anything, sporty. I mean, I threw a javelin backwards instead of forwards. All those sort of stupid things.
I very much grew up the same.
Did you?
Yes. On the football field, as the ball was coming towards me, I would lift my legs up rather than kick it out.
I'd run away from it.
I think a lot of us in theatre, in the arts, I think we are a different type, aren't we? That doesn't necessarily connect with sport.
Exactly right. Anyway, sorry, those sporty people out there.
No, that's a talent in itself.
Of course it is.
Yes.
Of course it is. Anyway, so all that side of things, I wasn't very good. But there was one friend at the school, and he found that there was an audition, I can tell you how long ago it was, for the musical Oliver. And they wanted workhouse boys. And he was going to go along because he went on a Saturday morning. He was his family had a bit more money in the bank, and he was able to go to a Saturday morning drama class. So I think he'd heard about this audition. Anyway, he said, come along with me, because I thought, I'd be love to do that. So we went along. And sadly, I was, believe it or not, I was too tall because the original boy was I think his name was Keith Hampshire. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, played Oliver, and I was slightly taller than him, and they wanted the workhouse boys to be, shorter or small, certainly not taller than the main lead. And so I didn't get the part. But I love the fact that I'd been on this sort of stage or wherever it was. Do you know, I've even forgotten where it all was. But it was Lionel Bart's musical. It was amazing. And walking back from that, I thought, well, maybe because I'm too tall, or I wasn't really, I was about 4'9" then or something, or probably less. Anyway, I thought, well, if my body's wrong or if my face is wrong, maybe I could do puppets because you won't have to see me. I can be any sort of character. I can be a mouse and a lion in the same play. No one's going to know it's me because I'll be hidden. So that sort of started me thinking, maybe there, is an opportunity. Then I'd already done shows I lived in a block of flats in South London. And I used to do shows. I had Pelham puppets. They were these puppets you could buy. Sadly, the factory's no longer, but it was sort of started in about 1947 by a man called Bob Pelham. And they were fairly simple marionettes for children. And I managed to get 3 of those over the years. Even for our family, they're a bit expensive, but it was wonderful, and I was working those. I did a few glove puppet things. I had an upturned table I lived on the first floor, pardon me, and the upturned table turned into a stage. I had a wind-up gramophone. An auntie, don't know who she was now, but anyway, gave me this wind-up gramophone. I had some 78 records, Gracie Fields and Victor Sylvester. Not the sort of music I really wanted, although Gracie Fields' songs were quite funny, and I did a marionette miming to this sort of stuff. And the kids from the flats came on and sat on the stairs going up to the second floor. Raked auditorium. I didn't know that at the time. Cold bums because it was concrete. But anyway, they seemed to like what I was doing. And then I did a show. I bought a Pollock's Toy Theatre. That's the Victorian little tiny theatres that you could get hold of. And they were basically, you cut out, there were sheets of paper, and then you stuck them onto cardboard, and you had your scenes, and then you had your little figures, and they were, again, I've stuck those onto cardboard. Sometimes I coloured them in, sometimes I couldn't be asked, and I just cut them all out with scissors, and I marked on the back of the thing. That was, the character. If it was in Treasure Island, it was Long John Silver's first appearance, 1, and then 2, and you had different. So
you started to discover theatre on your own in the world.
I did really.
To create this by yourself through
absolutely.
Through it sounds like play.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, it's all through play. And I got a group of friends who were quite keen to watch me do all this. So it was really good. I mean, one of the things when I was doing this Pollock's Theatre, there was the film version of Hamlet, which came out in the 40s, I think, Laurence Olivier, and version. And I managed to get a book of the figures and the scenes and stuff, and I cut those out. I was doing this scene with Horatio on the ramparts and the ghost of Hamlet's father coming in, hello, I'm the ghost. And I was doing all this sort of stuff. And I had a group of kids. Now I'd now moved in from the sort of stairs going up to the second floor, but into my bedroom, which was tiny. But I mean, there was about 5 kids in there watching this Pollock's Toy Theatre. I was hidden away behind a bit of cardboard and was doing all this stuff. And I did this scene, and I thought, gosh, they're marvellous. They're so quiet. They're so into it. And I was enjoying myself doing all this rubbish.
You'd found yourself as the puppet master.
Oh, absolutely.
You found your element. So what I want to know is, as you found yourself, as I guess quite a young age, to discover a purpose in life, how did that feel for you?
Oh, I tell you what, I learned a lesson on doing that show. The lesson was that I thought they were wonderfully quiet. I thought, at the end, I'd finished that scene. I came out, and all the kids had crept away. They were bored out of their minds. I was having great fun. So I suddenly thought, oh, wait a minute. Theatre isn't about just enjoying yourself. It's about actually making the audience entertained, and making them have fun. And, it's a shared experience. So that was a really good lesson, and I learned that very early on, I think. And the fact that I was able, anyway, as you say, I did discover that I had a sort of talent, I suppose, of performance, and I loved it. But also, after that experience, I learned that, it's not just about me enjoying it. You've got to somehow, make sure that the audience is enjoying it. It's, as I say, a two-way experience.
Yes.
And that was the beginnings of me thinking, I think I'd quite like to do this. I wonder if I can do this as a profession. And then I told you the story of joining the Little Angels. So
was the Little Angel really the turning point for you, discovering the actual theatre itself? Was that the moment where it really solidified as this is what you could be doing for the rest of your life?
Absolutely. Because it was a building, and there was the audiences came in those early days, it was about making an audience, getting an audience to come and find the theatre. Because in those days, Islington wasn't quite as a grand place as it is now. And, taxi drivers wouldn't know where Little Angel, never heard of the Little Angel Theatre. And, you'd have to sort of, there wasn't Time Out, there wasn't all these magazines. We didn't really have, in the early days, many press people coming along. I remember we had the Daily Telegraph, the ballet critic, fun enough, his name was Fernand Hall. He'd come along and review shows, but that was one newspaper. The others didn't really come along in the early days, and so it was about us. We did everything in this theatre. We printed brochures ourselves. We had an Adana printing press. John Wright learned to typeset. Extraordinary. And we printed, 500 leaflets or something, and then we waited for the print to dry, and then we'd fold them into half, and you'd have the cover Little Angel Theatre and what was on. And we'd go round to all the squares, all the posh squares in Islington. There were a few. And we'd post them through the letterboxes to get people to come to the theatre. And they did, it was lovely. But it was a slow process. It took a long time for an audience to know that the theatre was in existence. Sadler's Wells, of course, was down the road. There wasn't the pub theatres when we started either. There was right across the road, there's the famous King's Head Theatre, where, pub theatre, where it's now got its own building now. But, it was, that didn't start, I don't think, to the late 60s. We'd already established, or the theatre was already established itself in 1961. So, it was a long process, but it was a wonderful time because we were all learning, about what performances would work for the audiences. John Wright had quite a lot of experience beforehand for shows, and he never, ever felt that he would do shows just for children. There were shows for the whole family because the parents bring the kids. They've got to be entertained as well. So there was that lovely dual.
There was that dynamic. And I wonder if there was something in the learning together as you came up, as you were going through this process of play and discovery, not just doing that on your own anymore. That community involvement.
Absolutely. it was a collaborative experience for everybody. And it was lovely. They took me in as part of that team. Mm-hmm. And we really did. We became a team of people. We knew each other. We knew each other's, faults. We knew each other's, talents and stuff. And I don't know. It was just exciting to be with. We sort of, I suppose we gave each other encouragement to, it was very much a team. Puppetry is actually a collaborative medium anyway. Mm-hmm. There's, you don't just do it on your own. There's a whole lot of people usually helping, especially nowadays when puppet shows usually have more, 3 people to a puppet sometimes, depending on the type of puppet it is. So it very much needs that collaboration, and I learned that very early on, and I love it. Really I did do my own one-man shows eventually too while I was at the theatre. We had shows for the very young, and John Wright said, you could do your own puppet show. Why don't you do a show? And I'd already been to a place called the Educational Puppetry say that again. The Educational Puppetry Association. And it sounded like very grand. Mm-hmm. It was a basement in Holborn, Southampton. Mm-hmm. And a lovely couple ran it, and they became my mentors for glove puppetry. And they let me work in their glove puppet stages and work puppets. And eventually they helped me make my first show. And in the end, I performed it here for Saturday morning shows, which, again, that was wonderful. It was very interesting. people say, "Oh, did you have a little peephole so you could see how the audience reacted?" I said, No. I said, I developed big ears to listen to the audience reaction. And I'd seen things like Punch and Judy and various other shows by that time. And I felt that the sort of show that I wanted to do was character-based. It was all about strong characters. So I'd have the show that I had was a character called Snitchy Titch. He was the hero, but he was a bit silly and a bit daft. And then there was the Dodo, who was frightfully lovely, he had a marvellous voice. He was like everybody's favourite uncle. And he'd lived for hundreds of years, so he was very, very erudite, as I used to say. But anyway, no, I'm joking. But he was lovely. And then I had the robber, who basically was like that. And so I had these three characters. And because I knew what they had for breakfast every day, I knew all about them, I improvised the play around their characters, if you see what I mean. And if the kids joined in with this lovely theatre, it seats 100, it was quite intimate. So I was able to, if a kid shouted out, "Oh, Dodo, can I ask you something?" "Oh, yes, what is it you want?" And so I'd be able to talk. And the other kids would listen to see what, the response from the Dodo was. And that was lovely. So I had this lovely to and fro stuff.
And was that a natural process with the audience? Did that all happen organically, or do you have to work on that?
I suppose I did work on that. I'd seen shows where people say, "Hello, my name's Joey the Clown. What's my name, children? Joey the Clown." And I didn't like that. I wanted them to come out with stuff without me having to sort of force it from them. And so I think this is why I think the characters were very important to me. And they would carry on. And a lot of the kids would say, "Excuse me, did you want something?" Or something. And so I would react in that way back. So yeah, it was wonderful, and it happened. And my problem was I can't remember some of the most wonderful comments that kids said. For instance, at the very end of the show, I had the Dodo has this magic safe, and he's heard about the robber, and Snitch's got the gold back that it was his life savings, and they put it in the kitchen because the Dodo has made a secret surprise for the robber, because he probably will come back. And the kids said, "Oh, yes, he's going to come back. Oh, thank you very much for letting me know." This sort of thing.
Yes.
And anyway, the robber came back, got the safe back open, and it was a water pistol, and he got water squirted in his face, and went, "I want my mummy," and he was off, and that was him done. But I remember doing one of the performances, and a little girl, probably sitting in the front row here, said, "Excuse me, Dodo." And so, "Oh, yes, what is it?" "You squirted water and it's gone on my sock. My mum's, it's all wet," or something like this, you see. So I said, "Oh, I'm very sorry, but it's only water. It'll dry off soon," or something daft like that. Lovely, lovely comments. And then I was doing a show, and it was a mixture of families, again, a bit like The Little Angel, parents were there, but it was in a big marquee. It was much bigger audience. And I remember it was the days when I was working with Matthew Corbett, who was Sooty Fame and things, Harry's son, and he was in the audience, and I'm thinking, I've got to do this show good, I've got to show off. Anyway, this kid, there was teenagers, all sorts of people, and the Dodo was sort of saying, "Hello, everybody, I'm the Dodo bird," and suddenly from the audience, the "Dodo's a puff," and I don't know because I knew the Dodo. He turned around and said, "It takes one to know one, lad." Well, that completely silenced that poor kid. I mean, and in that sort of quick response, it just sort of happened from nowhere. I mean, I don't often remember my responses because it's like in the moment. But it's that you see is
that improvisation, that being alive, that being in the moment, like you say, is very important within a performance.
Absolutely.
Now, I wonder with you, where you went from being a place in here, 100-seat auditorium, performing your puppetry here, your characters here, you at some point, I feel like there must have been like a turning point for you, because your career has taken you on to being a place where your puppets have become national treasures. You yourself are a national treasure.
Yeah.
People love, particularly children of the 80s and 90s like myself. You've had a huge impact on a nation with your puppetry. So how do you go from here to there?
Wow, that was interesting. Do you know, it was a telephone call. I mean, I'm afraid. I have a friend, or had a friend, sadly he passed away a few years ago now, and he was working on the program Rainbow. This is how my television or film stuff started. And he had taken over, but he'd also been asked he was also a brilliant puppet maker. He did some work here first before he set up his own company. Anyway, he was asked to make a series of a stage show they had been doing. The company's called Playboard Puppets, and him and his partner Ian Allen, John Thurtle was the name of the guy, and he had been performing Zippy. In the original days, Zippy was performed by, funny enough, my mentor from the EPA, the Educational Puppetry Association, Violet Philpott, and she just lip sung, if you like, to the voice of the puppet, because Zippy was obviously a male character. And they had Peter Hawkins, who was quite a well-known voice artist. He was, Bill and Ben. He did the voices of Bill and Ben.
The flower pot.
Flower pot.
The original Bill and Ben flower?
The original flower pot.
Yes, I was going to do an impression then.
Exactly.
Yes, there we go.
All that. Oh, wonderful. And he also was Captain Pugwash. He did the voices for that.
Really iconic character.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was obviously, when they set up Rainbow, this is now in the early 70s, the producer wanted to get the best people, and it was telly. They could probably,
yes,
encourage them they would come in. And so he did the first series, and he did the original Zippy voice, which was a sort of, hello, a bit slower, a bit sort of, and it was just Zippy. There was no George in those days. Anyway, sadly, Violet was doing the puppet, but she basically did something to her back. I don't know whether a disc went or something, and she literally had to lie on the floor, and it was mid-series. So John stepped in, who knew Violet as well. Most puppeteers knew Violet during that time, and so he stepped in and took over. And he also, because he was a brilliant puppet maker, made the Zippy iconic puppet that you see now. The original one was made by Violet, very nice, but very bit different. Anyway, so he took over, but then he was asked by producer if he could do this show called Button Moon. Now, people remember that show, I'm sure. And so they'd done a stage version of it, so he was now had to make a whole set of puppets for the television. And so he didn't have the time to perform Zippy, because it was sort of Monday to Fridays, more or less. And so he just rang me up. We were great friends anyway. And he said, "Oh, Ronnie, how about you taking over?" And of course, I thought, marvelous. And I remember telling John Wright, I said, I've been asked to do this telly series. And I said, it's a series. I'd done little bits of telly and bits of film work, but not sort of a continuous sort of job like for a series. And John Wright said, "Oh," now, he never spoke like this, but I was making him sound like this. "No, you sold your soul to the television." And I thought, no, I haven't really, because you see, we do get Friday and Saturdays and Sundays off, and I still come here and do shows. So, I mean, I was a workaholic.
So you can move into the world of telly and still come back to theatre.
I did.
You can mix the two.
Yeah, well, I did then, because basically I was one of the few puppeteers that knew all the shows, more or less. So I could just jump in, and I didn't need masses of rehearsals. So it was great, I just sort of, and by that time I was what John Wright would call one of his top operators, which was lovely. And so I loved performing shows with theatre. And so I didn't really lose my connection ever, really.
How important is that to hold on to a connection, like hold on to your foundations as you move forward in a new direction?
It's terribly important, because I think live shows are wonderful. There's nothing like having a live audience reaction. I mean, the telly was wonderful. It was very different. It was much more technical to begin with. I had to learn to look at a monitor, and not look at my puppet. It was weird, and doing that, and then lip sync to somebody else's voice originally. And but then it's funny, when you were doing puppet shows, you sometimes have a proscenium arch. Well, the edge of the television monitor, it was the proscenium arch, if you see what I mean. So you learn to keep your puppet out of somebody else's shot if it suddenly came in. All those sort of things. And you learn to do different types of movement, lots of reaction shots, which were great. And of course, puppets are the biggest upstagers in the world. And of course, you learn, and I did with Zippy, I sort of did lots of sort of stuff going, oh, and sort of, and we put in lots of movements. It was wonderful working. By the time I was working there, Roy Skelton was the voice man for both Zippy and George. George had already, been part of the troupe, as it were, on Rainbow, and he and we worked really well together because he almost, if I did a move, he would go, oh, or something, or do a vocal thing to it, or if he did a vocal thing, I'd do something, with him. It was, don't know how it works, but after a while, you really get,
there was some instinctive that you
we
that
both
you
of
was
us
developing.
were absolutely,
So then,
there.
when you were part of Rainbow, it really started to boom as a television series, become a national program that children have fallen in love with. Well, you was there during
under the table working a puppet,
the peak of that, and the character of Zippy did transform and come alive and become something extra that you brought to the table.
Yeah, I think.
Do you know what that was?
Well, I think it was. Partly it was Roy. Roy also changed the sort of Zippy thing. I mean, I think he put a lot of his vocal stuff into it, and I just added it with the movement, And if he saw the puppet going, oh, or something, or yawning, or doing a double take, or something, doing all these things that you can do with puppets. It was a connection we had, and we shared that sort of popularity. We knew that, I mean, the naughty character's always the best to play, and he was, he's fabulous, and he knows it all. I mean, what better? I mean, kids always. I think in all of us, we always wished we could have a bit of Zippy in us. I think there is a bit of Zippy in all of us, actually. The show off, the sort of, I know it, I can do that. And even though you can't, I mean, Zippy lots of times couldn't do it.
I guess seeing a character like Zippy as a child gives you a sense of freedom.
Yes.
That you might not necessarily think that you have.
Absolutely.
Because, as a child, we're put in schools and we're told all the things that we can and can't do all of a sudden. But for me, watching Rainbow as a child, it really sparked my own creativity.
Yeah.
It really woke me up to storytelling and my imagination.
Yeah.
So how does that feel for you that you've been part of giving that to a generation of children?
It's an honor, really. I mean, you see, when I was doing it, I didn't think too much about what the audience out there were. I mean, I didn't know how much they were appreciating it, really. Mm-hmm. We did have loads of letters come in, we always sign things and we'd answer sort of stuff, and then the secretaries would go and type them out somewhere or something, because this was at Thames Television, a big company, so they had all sorts of people to help do all that. And we produced, there was postcards of the characters, so they were sent off, and we had a badge, rainbow badges, and things like that. So, I mean, I knew it was popular because after my first series there, I think it was about 6 weeks I'd worked there, and they said, would you come back and we'd like to use you for the next, come be, we're going to do another series in.
So you knew you knew that children were connecting.
Oh yeah, we knew they were connecting. Mm-hmm. I think people like Jeffrey and the singers, Jeffrey being the presenter of the program.
Yes,
he obviously knew a bit more about the connection with the audience, because every time he'd go down Teddington High Street or something, Jeffrey,
yes,
are you from Rainbow? And the same with the singers. Whereas I'm an anonymous figure. I'm not so anonymous now with this great Zippy shirt on. But, I mean, at that time, and I quite like that. I mean, as a puppeteer, it's not about me, it's about the characters I perform.
Yes.
And so it was nice to be able to have that sort of distance from the audience, although it was lovely to hear that Jeffrey was being not chased down the street or anything, but, people would recognise him. I didn't know how big the program was, even though I did it. I mean, I did it for 20 years, can you believe? But once the program finished at Thames, we started to do things like student union gigs all over the country. Right. And that was just amazing. There was queues of people queuing up to see us do our little, I think it was 30 minutes or 40 minutes sort of little gig thing we did. We pretended to put records on. It was Zippy and George's Disco or something, and it was all 80s and 70s and 80s music playing, and we were dancing to it. And by that time, I was doing the voice. So I was going, "Oh, hello, Cambridge," doing all the sort of stuff like that, and it was great fun.
So those children that watched it at a young age, they were starting to grow up,
absolutely,
and had this sense of nostalgia for the character.
And it still goes on today.
Well, I first met you at Comic-Con, didn't I? In
of course
London.
you did.
And I was eagerly awaiting a moment to talk to you, and I had to keep returning because the queue for you was constant, for people wanting to have a connection with you and Zippy.
And I'm sure it's to do with children as well. Your childhood memories are so sort of in there, aren't they? Ingrained in yourself. And if they're memories that you really enjoyed and you loved, or they're characters that you remember, then they stay there. And suddenly to see the character that you loved as a kid on, there live, and there's the puppeteer, and he's got the puppet there, and it's
and I also saw
marvelous.
A new generation. So for myself, I would often show my children when they were younger the programs that I loved, and I would put on Rainbow for them. I think it was on Nick Jr. for a period of time. And that was when my children were young, and I'd be like, this is what I loved. So you'll find some love here too.
I've got grandparents now, can you believe it, come up. I mean, it is extraordinary. And then it's funny, the kids that saw it, sometimes the teenage was a little bit like, oh yeah, that was when I was a kid. A little bit, it's a bit cool. And then you chat to them, and then they want to know as much as everybody else about all the backgrounds, and was there a rude rainbow? Oh yes, there was.
Yes, we've seen that one. The Twanger episode.
The Twanger episodes, yes. Which was made.
And if you haven't seen it, you need to go and check it out.
It's easily viewable on YouTube.
Yes.
But
what happened there with that episode? Was it live, or was that you playing and experimenting and having fun?
Well, it was basically the before all these sort of, what do you call it? TV burps or whatever, all those, all the, is it called TV burps? I can't remember what they call it.
A behind the scenes?
Behind the scenes, but all the stuff that went wrong.
Right, okay.
That sort of
But
thing.
a whole episode that went wrong.
Well,
oh, right.
Well, what happened was the BBC and ITV used to have all these sort of programs, but internally it was just for fun. The Christmas tapes, they were called.
Tape, yes.
And so they said, "Oh, could Rainbow do a Christmas tape for us?" And so our producer at the time, Charles, said, "Oh, well, you can do it, but you can't swear or anything like that. They've got to still be in character."
That was what was so genius about the episode.
It was, wasn't it? And so basically, we over lunch, we all added little bits to it. And we wrote this, or when I say we, I think it was probably Stanley and Roy between them did most of the script writing. Stanley being Bungle Bear at the time. And so we did it as a Rainbow. We did it on a Thursday, because usually on a Thursday we only recorded one program. There's usually a bit of time at the end, and we asked the cameraman, "Would you stay and do that?" And they were very happy. And so we did this thing, Zippy saying, "One, skate 2, skate 3, skate, oh," and didn't say, and then George said, "Wait, you got your little one," or something like that, all this sort of silly.
Yes, well, I particularly remember the bit where Zippy wanted to play with someone's twanger.
Gosh, I know.
It was all about musical instruments, but there was, if a child watched that, there was nothing offensive
Absolutely
there at all.
Right, absolutely. And we used that, we had a shoebbox with an elastic band, and that was the twang,
Yes, of course.
And because we only had one arm to do it, for the two puppets. So, we twing with it. And that's how they were called twangs. I mean, it all became silly. But
it was never intentionally for the public.
No, it was an internal thing. We actually won. I don't know if it was a prize, but we got a letter from the head of children saying, "Oh, well done, you're very funny," And I suppose it was a competition or something. I can't really remember. But, and of course, when Channel 4 started, and I can't remember what year that was, but there was a late night show, and somebody had a VHS tape in those days of it and gave it into Channel 4, and they showed it literally late night thing. And it was, whoa, wow. And so that caused a bit of sensation. Oh, what's Rainbow doing, you know, or something like this. And it was only about 3 minutes. It's less than the normal program, but it was done as a program. So anyway, and then when YouTube started, it was people just put it out onto YouTube, and Fremantle Media, who used to own the rights to the program, took it off. Oh dear, we can't have that. You know, it's our baby. You know,
but enough had seen it.
Enough had seen it.
But then it became legendary.
Well, this is it. And of course, in the end, Fremantle would take it off, and then it was put back on again, and it went back and forth for a bit, and then in the end, they just said, "Oh well, you know." Yeah. And so it's out there now, yes. And people talk about it a lot. But it was a fun time. We did it was great fun, and we had great fun recording them. Again, you know, I'm talking about this thing of it being a collaborative thing, being a puppeteer. Well, it was the same with this group of actors, puppeteers. You know, we all worked collaboratively together. If I said that right. Anyway, and we became friends, you know, and that makes the program special as well, because there was no, I mean, there was an argument, you know, Zippy was saying too much or something or other, you know, cut that script or whatever it was. I mean, it was very funny. I used to take it as a compliment that the floor manager would sometimes come up to me and say, "Oh, Zippy, can you not say blah, 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 but say that." The director would like that. And I said, "Don't tell me. Tell Roy, who's over there doing the voice. Thank you." They think, "I'm marvellous." You know, they think that he's really... So yes. That was always nice. Mm-hmm. But no, it was wonderful. We had wonderful storytellers. We had big names, Judi Dench. We had, lovely Pat Coombs, who was a comedian who worked with a lot of people like Benny Hill and Tommy Cooper and loads of people. And they used to play well, not so much Judy. She did a regular story, but Patty would come in and be a character like an auntie, and she was hilarious. She was lovely, ever so sweet. But there are lots of people over the years.
So you've met some wonderful people within the entertainment industry.
Absolutely.
Your career has moved throughout the 80s and 90s in almost every puppetry entertainment form going. You've moved you went into the Jim Henson company with the Labyrinth.
Yeah.
And you've been part of Sooty and Sweep as well. Yeah. So you had this amazing career. So where are you now with the career? You take the puppets out into the world and you interact with people. Have you found yourself at all back in this space?
Yes, I did a performance. Well, I did a show here way back in 2000. I think it was 2013 or something like that. A lovely play called Dogs Don't Do Ballet, and we've performed this show so many times now at the theatre. It's wonderful. It's only a two-hander, and but that was lovely to be back, you know, here performing again. But I've done performances in shows here over the years when I was still doing Rainbow. You know, I was still doing stuff. I've become what they call an honorary associate of the theatre now, which is very nice. So I get invited to see shows, and the sets that you'll see behind us is a wonderful show called Going on a Bear Hunt it's a story by Michael Rose. And
I know very well. Yes, I brought my children up with that book, and I think it was around when I was a child.
Yeah,
well.
Absolutely.
Yes, I definitely sung it in the Scouts.
Yeah. No, definitely. And Michael Rosen is an absolute lovely person. I mean, we did a show about after John Wright died, I think in 1991, a few years later, we did a sort of show to show what John's puppetry meant for people and stuff. And we used marionettes and glove puppets and rod puppets. And Michael wrote it. And so we met him, you know, and it was lovely to meet him. He's an absolute lovely person. And I mean, incredibly clever man. And yet he's just like you or I, you know, just very, very friendly.
Aren't all us creatives just normal people?
Yeah, exactly.
Playing, going back to the play. That's what we're doing. We're playing, we're experimenting and being part of this community. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much for sharing. I know that something is due to come in here in a moment. I think they've got to prepare for the show.
Oh, right. Lovely.
But I feel like there's so much more of your journey to discover. But one last question for you then as we wrap this up. A little hypothetical for you.
Oh,
if we was to be in a time machine on this podcast and we could go anywhere in your puppetry career, Do you have a place that you would go to, a special moment that sits with you?
Well, there is a moment which is just, it happened very recently, actually, and that's why I loved it. We haven't had a marionette show here for quite a long time. It's due to sort of financial reasons, really. You know, you might have 5 puppeteers in a big marionette show, and that's a big expense for the theatre to find, and it's only a tiny theatre. Anyway, the John Wright's daughter, Sarah Wright, was asked to basically, I'm not going to say get rid of, but take down the old backcloths that were hanging in the theatre because they were a bit of a fire risk. You know, there's health and safety now is a really big thing in theatre, and fair enough. Anyway, so she did. She said, well, what I'd like to do is if there was a Saturday free, and it was this year actually, there was, and we basically took the backcloths down. But before we took them down, she photographed some of it, because the cloths were painted by Lindy Wright, her mum, and they were for all these iconic shows that we did in the years ago. And we thought, well, not just, it's nice to see the pictures of the backcloths. Why don't we have marionettes coming on? So we cleared the bridge, because a lot of it's the bridge up above there, bridge over the stage for the marionettes. That was cleared of space, and we brought marionettes in. The 3 of us were working puppets. Like I worked The Little Mermaid coming in, you know, my favourite show, and we had the music going on, and we had a wonderful lighting chap who did most beautiful lighting, and there was gauzes and things going in and out, and to me, I remember having a moment when I stood back on the bridge and I looked back and I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a iconic moment for me. And it was, and I felt quite almost tearful, because here we were back to how I started watching a marionette show. And it was basically a demonstration. It probably lasted about, I think, 35 minutes or something. And we had this lovely little iconic character, Sarah brought him on at the end, Mr. Bumble, and he had the end sign and just did a bow and thank you very much. And the tabs came. We had a full house. It was wonderful. And we had a sort of Q&A afterwards too to talk about, and Sarah was, you know, did a wonderful Q&A with all the public. We joined in a little bit from the back. Oh yes, Sarah, you got that wrong, Sarah. You know, and all this sort of, but all great fun. And then hopefully in the future we'll have marionette shows back here again. If it's all about money, I hate to say.
Yes.
There's lots of people who would be very keen to come and see marionette shows, I'm sure. But anyway, that was the latest. I mean, I've got several. I mean, the fact that I did Zippy for so long on TV was wonderful. Working with the Jim Henson Company, I'm about to go to a labyrinth experience, I think they call it, in a couple of weeks' time, where we've got Brian Henson coming over, we've got Dave Golds, we've got all these amazing American puppeteers who are all involved in the Labyrinth, and I was an additional puppeteer. I'm one of the VIPs, which is rather exciting.
Yeah, nice.
So that's nice. And as I say, I'm going to Skipton this week. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't stop, really.
No. Well, what an amazing career in puppeteering you've had, and what an amazing example of playing and following your dreams, even at that point where you're told you'll get no money from this. You've in a way you've showed that you can have a career in life. In
I think if you're persistent and if you're really, I mean, I think you've got to have a talent too. I mean, you've got to have something. But if you're nurtured by wonderful people and people see something in you, then you know,
opportunities will open up.
Exactly, the world's your oyster. Yeah. Yeah.
So to new puppeteers, would you have a word of advice that you would say to them?
Yeah, I mean, try and see as many puppet shows as you possibly can. Visit the Little Angel, visit the Norwich Puppet Theatre, visit the theatre, the Upfront Theatre in Cumbria. There's a wonderful Little Bigger Theatre in Edinburgh. Join the British Puppet Guild. I'm the president. It's a very friendly group. There's an advert, isn't it? But see all these things. Try and you can go to your local library and get books on puppetry. Books are wonderful as a sort of reference point, but do go and see as many shows. Talk to the puppeteers after the show. You know, they're a friendly group. I mean, I'm quite friendly. All of them are. What else? Experiment. If you feel you can make puppets, do that. I'm not a maker. I'm just a performer. I get other people to make my puppets for me. Really, I mean, I did make some in the early days, but I've found that performance skills was my sort of talent, and that's what I've stuck to. But so see as many shows, make a show yourself. Nowadays, you can put it on YouTube. And if you're keen on television and film, because a lot of people are, I know, it's a very difficult sort of area to get into. It is for actors even. But you can put your own shows on YouTube and do a little performance there. And you never know, a lot of directors and producers see those YouTube clips and they might be interested in, call you. So that's a little bit of information, hopefully, encouragement, and just follow your dream.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ronnie. This truly has been a dream moment for me, meeting you, meeting one of my childhood heroes. So thank you so much for sharing. And if anyone has been watching or listening to this conversation, we appreciate you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And thank you, sir. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.